Most artists don't fail because they lack talent. They fail because they forget why they started. In a world obsessed with algorithms, trends, and instant applause, creatives are quietly losing the one thing that once made their work undeniable: meaning. We are told to post more, sell faster, adapt quicker, and slowly, without realizing it, we begin creating for attention instead of truth. But here's the uncomfortable reality. When your work has no why, the world feels it. It becomes noise instead of a signal. Content instead of connection. Decoration instead of declaration. The artists who endure, the ones who shape culture, move people, and outlive trends, are not driven by fame or validation. They are anchored by something deeper, a cause, a belief, a reason so clear that even rejection cannot silence it. Your why is not a marketing tool. It is your compass when applause fades. It is the reason you keep creating when no one is watching. And without it, burnout is inevitable. This is not about making more art. This is about making art that means something. Because when you are clear on why you create, the world doesn't just see your work. They feel it. Talent opens doors, but purpose decides whether anyone stays once you walk through them. The world notices skill quickly. How sharp the line is, how perfect the timing feels, how impressive the output looks. But notice is fleeting. Men are often taught to chase recognition, to prove worth through performance, to measure value by external response. Talent feeds that instinct. Purpose challenges it. Purpose asks a deeper question. Why does this work need to exist, even if no one applauds it today? Men create differently when they are driven by purpose rather than validation. When a man knows why he creates, his work stops asking for permission. It carries conviction instead of insecurity. From a male psychological lens, purpose becomes an internal anchor. It replaces the need for constant comparison with quiet confidence. Women, as audiences and collaborators, sense this immediately. They don't respond only to technical excellence. They respond to intention. Purpose communicates safety, direction, and emotional clarity without saying a word. Recognition excites the ego, but remembrance forms through meaning. Talent can impress in a moment, but purpose forms a bond over time. Men often feel pressure to be strong, capable, and in control, yet purpose allows vulnerability without weakness. It gives permission to express belief, values, and emotional truth through creation. From a woman's perspective, this depth is what makes work resonate beyond aesthetics. It signals authenticity rather than performance. When purpose is missing, talent becomes exhausting to maintain. Men burn out trying to stay impressive, constantly raising the bar to earn the same reaction. Purpose removes that pressure by shifting the goal from being admired to being aligned. Women don't remember who tried the hardest to impress them. They remember who made them feel something real. Purpose turns creation into communication, not competition. Talent shows what you can do, but purpose reveals who you are. Approval is a dangerous currency because it trains the creative to listen outward before listening inward. When men create for approval, they begin adjusting their voice to match expectations instead of expressing what they actually believe. Psychology teaches men early that acceptance is earned through performance. Be impressive, be useful, be admired. In art and creativity, this turns creation into a transaction rather than an expression. And slowly, the work loses its edge, its honesty, and its identity. Men who chase approval start to dilute their instincts. They hesitate before committing to an idea, questioning whether it will be liked, shared, or praised. This hesitation is not caution. It is fear disguised as strategy. From a male perspective, approval feels like survival. It validates competence and worth. From a female perspective, this hesitation is felt as inconsistency. Women sense when work is trying to please rather than trying to say something, and that instinctive awareness creates emotional distance. Approval shifts power away from the creator and hands it to the audience. The moment men allow reactions to dictate direction, their voice becomes fragmented. One piece leans one way, the next leans another, not because of growth, but because of response. Women respond less to fluctuation and more to coherence. A consistent voice communicates self-trust, and self-trust is what creates emotional credibility across genders. When approval becomes the goal, authenticity becomes a risk. Men often fear rejection more than irrelevance, yet the paradox is that approval-seeking leads directly to invisibility. Work that offends no one rarely moves anyone. From a woman's perspective, safety without sincerity feels hollow. From a man's perspective, constant adjustment feels like loss of self. Creating from approval silences intuition, replaces courage with calculation, and turns a personal voice into a borrowed echo. Rejection is not what breaks most artists. Confusion about why they started is what makes rejection unbearable. Men are conditioned to equate rejection with failure, to interpret a closed door as a verdict on their worth. Without a clear why, every no feels personal, every silence feels humiliating, and the impulse to quit becomes rational rather than emotional. Men with a defined why experience rejection differently. Instead of internalizing it as inadequacy, they process it as information. Their identity is not tied to the immediate outcome, but anchored to a belief that existed before the rejection arrived. From a psychological standpoint, this creates resilience. The work continues not because success is guaranteed, but because stopping would mean betraying something internal. Women sense this endurance not as stubbornness, but as grounded resolve. When a man lacks a why, rejection attacks the ego directly. He begins to question his talent, his relevance, and even his right to create. From a woman's perspective, this internal collapse often shows up as withdrawal or defensiveness. But when a why is present, rejection does not harden the creator, it sharpens him. Women respond to this clarity because it signals emotional stability rather than fragility. A clear why transforms rejection from a threat into a filter. Not every audience is meant to understand the work, and not every opportunity deserves a yes. Men who know their why stop chasing universal approval and start choosing alignment. Women experience this selectivity as confidence, not arrogance, because it is rooted in principle rather than pride. Rejection removes the applause, the validation, and the reassurance, leaving only one question behind. If the work still matters without witnesses, the why remains intact while everything else falls away. Noise is what happens when creation is detached from intention. In a world saturated with content, men are encouraged to produce more, faster, louder, often mistaking visibility for impact. Without meaning, art becomes another signal competing for attention rather than a message carrying belief. From a male psychological standpoint, this constant output can feel productive, yet it leaves an internal emptiness because the work is no longer connected to identity. Men often confuse complexity or intensity with depth. They add more technique, more shock, more cleverness, hoping it will compensate. For the absence of meaning. But skill without purpose overwhelms rather than connects. From a woman's perspective, this overload feels impersonal. Women are drawn less to excess and more to coherence, work that communicates intention, not just ability. Meaning gives art direction and restraint. When a man understands why he creates, he knows what to leave out as much as what to include. This clarity creates trust. Women sense when art is guided by conviction instead of impulse, and that conviction makes the work feel emotionally safe and psychologically engaging. Noise demands attention, meaning invites attention. Without meaning, men often tie their self-worth to reaction metrics. If the work performs, they feel validated. If it doesn't, they feel invisible. This cycle creates dependence on external feedback. Meaning interrupts that cycle by anchoring value internally. From a female perspective, art rooted in meaning feels less needy and more generous. It offers something rather than asking for something. When meaning is absent, art shouts to be noticed. When meaning is present, it speaks clearly even in silence. Men who create with meaning don't need to explain themselves constantly. And women don't need to search for intention beneath the surface because it is already there. People respond emotionally long before they respond logically. Men are often taught to believe that quality, features, and output are what persuade others, so they focus on perfecting the product. Yet audiences rarely connect to craftsmanship alone. They connect to intention. From a male psychological perspective, this can feel frustrating, doing everything right, and still not being felt. From a female perspective, connection begins when the work communicates why it exists, not just how well it is made. Men who lead with what they make often unknowingly hide behind it. The work becomes armor, protecting them from vulnerability while still seeking acceptance. Women sense this distance instinctively. They may admire the skill but remain emotionally untouched because the work feels guarded. When a man leads with why, however, the work becomes an invitation rather than a shield, allowing others to step into the belief behind it. Emotion is the language of meaning. Men sometimes resist this because emotion has been framed as weakness rather than communication. But purpose-driven creation does not weaken authority, it strengthens it. When a man creates from why, his work carries emotional clarity instead of emotional confusion. Women respond to this clarity because it signals honesty and self-awareness, qualities that create trust. Audiences don't consciously analyze intention, but they feel it immediately. They feel whether the work is chasing approval or standing for something. Men who understand this stop trying to convince and start trying to express. From a woman's perspective, expression feels human, while persuasion feels performative. One invites engagement, the other invites skepticism. When why leads, what follows naturally aligns. Technique becomes supportive rather than dominant, and talent serves the message instead of overshadowing it. Men experience relief when the pressure to impress is replaced by the responsibility to be truthful. Women experience resonance when the work reflects belief rather than strategy. The strongest connection occurs when the audience feels seen rather than sold to. Control over meaning is rarely taken by force. It is surrendered through silence. When men fail to define why they create, they leave a vacuum, and the world is quick to fill it with assumptions, labels, and expectations. Psychology teaches men to adapt in order to survive, to read the room and respond accordingly. But adaptation without self-definition turns creativity into compliance rather than expression. Men who don't define their why often become shaped by feedback instead of guided by belief. Each comment, trend, or metric subtly redirects their work until the original intention is no longer recognizable. From a male perspective, this feels like being practical and responsive. From a female perspective, it feels like inconsistency. Women sense when a creator is being pulled by external forces rather than led by internal conviction. When the world defines a man's why, it often reduces him to a function. He becomes the artist who performs well in a category, the creator who fits a niche, the voice that is acceptable as long as it stays predictable. Men may accept this because it offers stability and approval. Women, however, often feel disengaged by this reduction because it lacks emotional risk and authenticity. Defining your why is an act of psychological ownership. It forces men to confront uncomfortable truths about what they believe, what they stand for, and what they are willing to lose. This discomfort is often avoided, yet it is precisely what creates depth. Women respond to this depth not because it is polished, but because it is honest. A defined why communicates boundaries, and boundaries create trust. Without a self-defined why, men become reactive rather than intentional. They wait for direction from the market, the audience, or the moment. From a woman's perspective, reactivity feels uncertain. From a man's perspective, it feels like being stuck in survival mode. Defining why shifts creation from defense to declaration. The world will always try to assign meaning because meaning creates control. When a man defines his own why, he reclaims authorship over his work, his identity, and the emotional impact he leaves behind.